want to walk through a few logistics first. So thank you and welcome to DEQ's Clean Transportation Funding webinar. Again, we are recording this meeting. Everyone's been automatically muted. If you do have questions either throughout the presentation or at the end, feel free to use the raise your hand feature. And if we do call on you, then please state your first and last name and what entity or organization you're representing. If you're on the phone, you're not on the Zoom webinar, press *6 to mute and unmute yourself and *9 to raise your hand. We'll remind you about those buttons at the end when we get into the Q&A portion of the webinar. There is a link here in case you need further help that only Zoom can provide. Hopefully everybody's on, can hear and see us. We'll also be using the chat box for any questions that you might have. So if it's easier for you to type in your question instead of trying to unmute yourself or whatever, feel free to type it in the chat box. And if we see something that we want to interrupt the presentation for to address, then we'll be able to hopefully address that question. Otherwise, we'll try and do that towards the end. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to DEQ's director, Chris Dorrington. Chris has been with DEQ for a number of years now. He was previously our Air, Energy, and Mining Division Administrator. And before that, he was at the Montana Department of Transportation. So has significant background in the funding that we're announcing today. And we appreciate you being with us, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Really appreciate that. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being on the call. I'm excited about the opportunity that the program has here and that we're advancing today. These funding opportunities will be impactful to Montana. I'm so glad that all of you joined the webinar to learn about the Clean School Bus and Clean Truck, Bus, and Airport Equipment programs. Nearly half of Montana's harmful nitrous oxide, or NOx, come from mobile sources like cars and trucks that we all drive. These funding opportunities will reduce those emissions by encouraging increased use of cleaner vehicles, including electric, alternate fuels, and cleaner diesel vehicles. You know, NOx affects the health of our Montana citizens, and this funding will improve upon that. Funding for these programs come from the US EPA's Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, or DERA, and the Volkswagen settlement. These funds are intended for projects and investments that reduce NOx, which contribute to asthma and respiratory illness. The Clean Bus program prioritizes replacing older diesel school buses with newer, cleaner ones. Funded by the EPA, this program makes clean transportation options more affordable for school districts. In turn, the new school buses reduce the amount of emissions students and bus drivers are exposed to. As a parent myself, improving the health of our kids is very personal to me. The Clean Truck, Bus, and Airport Equipment program is funded by the state's share of the national Volkswagen diesel emissions settlement. DEQ is looking to work with public and private entities, including cities, counties, and businesses, to replace older diesel vehicles with newer, cleaner ones, including street sweepers, garbage trucks, transit buses, school buses, bucket trucks, and many more medium and heavy duty trucks. I'll close my remarks by saying I'm excited about the opportunities that clean vehicles and innovative transportation options represent for our state here in Montana. I appreciate being on the call today to discuss the Clean School Bus and Clean Truck, Bus, and Airport equipment programs. And here's the thing, championing the use of cleaner vehicles, including electric and alternate fuel vehicles, will not only create jobs, but will also improve the environment and the health for all Montanans. And that is certainly a good thing for us. It's something I champion for sure. Thank you for participating in the call today. We look forward to working with successful applicants as we all drive into this exciting future. And with that, thanks, Neil, and I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate your time. So thank you again, everyone, for participating in today's webinar. We're talking about two different funding opportunities. And I want to go over the one that might be more familiar to school districts first. But as Chris said, there are two different opportunities. One is called the Clean School Bus Program, which focuses on the replacement of diesel school buses with new ones. And I'll get into more details on that in a moment. The application deadline is in just over a month, on November 15th, and all the project activities, purchasing the bus, getting rid of the old bus, will need to be completed by August of next year. This program is funded by the Environmental Protection Agency's Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, DERA. We have approximately $227,000 available to spend. The clean truck, bus, and airport equipment is broader. It still includes school buses, but I know that there are other entities that are involved, that are on this webinar, that are interested in some of the truck funding, as well as transit and shuttle buses and airport ground support equipment. This is funded with our share of the Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust settlement. The first application deadline will be January 14th of next year. Depending on how many applications we receive and how much funding we award, there will be a second application deadline in June, on June 17th. Successful awardees will have 20 months after execution of the grant contract to complete their project activities. And we have nearly $7.4 million available total for this funding opportunity. So first, for the Montana Clean School Bus Program, we're accepting applications for many Montana school districts statewide to replace older diesel buses with either battery electric, low NOx certified, low NOx means nitrogen oxides, propane or gasoline or new diesel buses. School districts that contract for their bus services are eligible to apply, but the application will need to come directly from the school district, but the school district should certainly be coordinating with their school bus contractor to coordinate which bus will be replaced, how to get the funding over to the contractor, making sure the old bus is being scrapped and whatnot. As I said, the application deadline is coming up on November 15th. For those of you who have participated in this funding opportunity in the last 2 years, we've had a little bit of a longer deadline than we have in years past and for this particular funding opportunity. But we have done this in the past, getting an application in by November and then completing it by August should be doable. But feel free to contact us after this webinar if you have questions or concerns about getting this done. So for eligible projects, if you want to replace your older diesel bus with either a low NOx certified, with either a propane, gasoline, or new diesel bus, the old bus that you're replacing can be model year 96 through 2009. Anything older than that or anything newer than that is not eligible under the EPA guidelines. For each of those different types of fuels, DEQ can fund up to 25% of the total cost or $22,500, whichever is less. Generally, we're giving out awards of the $22,500 for a new propane, new gasoline, or new diesel bus. We cannot, under the EPA guidelines, pay for the infrastructure. So if you're just starting to transition over to propane, for example, we cannot fund any of the infrastructure to refuel your propane school bus. Also, I'd like to note that this is the first time we've allowed for new gasoline replacements to be considered. The EPA had done that, had added gasoline earlier, a year or so ago. We had noticed it. We added it to this funding opportunity to make sure that school districts had all the different options available to them. If a school district wants to replace their old diesel bus with either a low NOx certified or a new battery electric school bus, those school buses can be, the old diesel school buses can be as old as 1996 and as new as 2019. For a low NOx certified, and that's pretty much a propane powered bus that's certified to an even lower NOx emission standard than other propane buses or diesel buses, we can give up to 35% or $31,500, whichever is less. We've done a number of those over the last 2 years where we've given that maximum $31,500. Again, we can't pay for the refueling, and the school district is responsible for the remaining cost of that school bus. For battery electric, under the EPA guidelines, we can give up to $148,500 or 45% of the total cost of the battery electric bus. Here we can pay for the cost of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So ideally, you would have your new electric bus parked in your bus barn. You would be charging it overnight, getting it ready to pick up kids in the morning. And we can pay for the cost of the charger that you would need to support that bus. Now, for the school districts that are on this webinar, I want you to keep these numbers in mind, because on the clean truck, bus, and airport equipment funding opportunity, these numbers do change in terms of the maximum grant award. But under this funding opportunity, $148,500 is the most that we can give. Because we're getting towards the end of the timeline that the EPA will give us to spend out this money, and also because we have already spent a bunch of it prior to this, we only have the $227,077 remaining. We probably will have to go through a competitive scoring process where we haven't done that in a number of years. And the scoring criteria, as you'll read in more detail in the RFA, focuses on poor air quality areas, how many students are being taken to and from school, what type of fuel you're applying for, and what the remaining usable life is on your current diesel-powered bus. There's a number of things that you need to include when you submit your proposal before November 15th, or by 5 p.m., I should say, Mountain Time. On November 15th is the application deadline. So make sure that you take a close look at the RFA, the request for applications, and the proposal submission requirements. Purchase of privately owned green vehicles. We'll get to that in just a moment, Paul. Thank you for the question. So that's pretty much it for the Clean School Bus program. It'll be a very quick project period, as I said, where everything needs to get done by August 31st of next year. And the applications are due next month. Happy to answer questions at the end of this webinar or after this webinar if folks have any questions about this funding opportunity moving forward. Excuse me. Now, some of you may be familiar with the Volkswagen settlement. For those of you who aren't, this involves a emissions cheating scandal that Volkswagen was caught up in a number of years ago. The U.S. Department of Justice came to a settlement agreement with Volkswagen, and based on the number of registered vehicles in each of the states were eligible for a certain amount of portion of that funding settlement. Montana received $12.6 million. The way that the settlement was negotiated, it was focusing on replacing medium and heavy duty vehicles. The only light duty vehicle portion of the settlement is talking about electric vehicle charging stations. The goal of the settlement was to reduce these NOx emissions that cause health problems, to invest in a clean alternative fuels and electric charging infrastructure, and achieve long-term air quality benefits. For Montana's portion of the settlement said that we could spend a maximum of 15% on light duty vehicle charging stations, and then also another 15% maximum on administration, marketing, and education about the Volkswagen settlement. What this clean truck, bus, and airport equipment funding opportunities focus on is the rest of that money in the green, the $8.8 million of getting vehicles, clean burning vehicles on the road. So that's what we're talking about here today. For more information on the Volkswagen settlement in general, feel free to go to our fuels page of the DEQ website and learn more about it. That's also where we have links to both of these funding opportunities, the clean school bus, as well as the clean truck, bus, and airport equipment. So for the clean truck is how I'll refer to it for the rest of this webinar. Again, the purpose is reducing NOx emissions and improving air quality and supporting investments in zero transportation vehicles. The funding, each grant is a maximum of $500,000, but there's also dependent on what type of project you're talking about. And we'll walk through that in just a moment. But the maximum grant is $500,000. We split this funding up into 4 different categories. So categories A and B are for class 4 through 8 trucks and buses. Class 4 through 8 basically means anything 14,001 pounds or heavier. For trucks, we're talking about things, as Chris alluded to, that are for local freight and delivery, including garbage trucks, dump trucks, street sweepers, couriers, delivery trucks, box trucks, concrete mixers. All of these things are out there. Now, under the Volkswagen settlement for both the trucks as well as these buses, the shuttle and transit buses, the vehicle that you're replacing, whether it's a street sweeper or a garbage truck or a transit bus or whatever, under these categories, needs to be diesel powered, and the engine model year can be from 92 to 2009. So again, anything older than 92, anything newer than 2009 under the settlement is not eligible. So make sure you check your engine tag before you start filling out the application form. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions if you start looking into different vehicles that are in your fleets. The way that the Volkswagen settlement was structured is that it gave a higher cost share percentage in terms of how much money states like Montana can give for these projects to government-owned vehicles instead of basically private fleets, a business or something like that. So these percentages reflect that. If you want to take your older diesel bus or truck and replace it with an alternate fuel, so alternate fuel by the settlement is defined as propane, compressed natural gas, liquefied natural gas, or not electric, that's a separate category. We can give you up to 60% of the cost of that new vehicle if you're a government-owned vehicle. So if the city that you live in owns its own garbage trucks, then we could give you up to 60% for a new compressed natural gas powered garbage truck. If you're a non-government-owned entity, then and you're talking about doing some sort of maybe a concrete mixer for your construction company, we can give up to 25% for that alternate fuel vehicle. This is the only category where we can also do new diesel, so basically diesel to diesel replacements. If you have a vehicle that you want to replace that's diesel powered and you want to get a new cleaner burning diesel, then we can do that for both categories. We can provide up to 20% of the cost of that. If you want to do an all electric, for government owned, as you can see, we can do up to 85% of the cost of that new electric vehicle. If it's non-government owned, if you want to do, you're a private transit agency or a courier delivery service, we can give up to 75%. So this is where the cost share percentages kick in. I'll get into more detail on that when I have a little bit of a better example. Again, if you want to replace your older diesel truck or bus with a new electric one, we can pay for the cost of the charging infrastructure. Details on these two categories are on pages 4 and 5 of the funding opportunity that, again, you can find on our website. Category C is for school buses. So this is where I reminded the school districts who are on this webinar to keep tuned. We can do here, again, class 4 through 8 school buses. Here it's a little bit more flexible in terms of what we can replace. We can replace anything that's 2009 or older. Now, under the DERA funding opportunity, the Clean School Bus Program, we can do anything as new to any old diesel vehicle as new as 2019. Here we can only do it as new as 2009. And again, that's a requirement of the settlement, but we can give more money than the Clean School Bus Program. So I've done a lot of research on electric school buses, and the general assumption is that a new electric school bus costs about $350,000, whereas a new diesel bus costs about $90,000 to $110,000, depending on how many different bells and whistles, different features you get on it. Now, we can't give 100% of the cost for a $350,000 bus, but at $350,000, we can give a school district nearly $300,000 at 85% of the cost of a new $350,000 electric school bus. And so basically a school district could replace an older diesel bus and get into a brand new electric school bus for about $55,000, half the cost of a new electric or new diesel school bus. So that's again where these cost share percentages come in. There will be plenty of projects. Transit buses are much more expensive. The latest numbers I've seen is they're anywhere between $700,000 to $750,000. So in that scenario, we could probably give the maximum $500,000 grant amount. But for school buses, I thought I'd give that option. Now, unlike the Clean School Bus funding opportunity, this is only for diesel to electric. If you think that the diesel or propane or gasoline is what makes sense for your school district's school bus fleet, then you should definitely think about applying to the Clean School Bus program, where we can give grants of $22,500 or $31,500 for low NOx propane powered school buses. Here, this is only electric. We're trying to get more interest, and there's plenty of cases in states like Montana, cold weather, mountainous states that have successfully deployed these electric school buses. And I'd be happy to answer questions about that later on. The final category we have is airport ground support equipment. The way that the settlement defines this is that this is equipment that's used to service aircraft between flights. I actually had a question yesterday from somebody wondering if this funding opportunity could fund a tractor that's cutting the grass around the runway. No, it's not directly servicing the aircraft. When you're talking about airport ground support equipment here, you're thinking about belt loaders, pushback tractors, and things of that nature. Something that interacts with the aircraft in between when it lands and when it takes off again. This is the one category also where it doesn't have to be diesel powered. Airport people will understand what this means, at least I hope they will. For those of us not dealing with airport ground support equipment all the time, you can probably respond to an email for the next moment or two. But here you can do, under the settlement requirements, you can replace older gasoline powered airport equipment. Here, just like school buses in this funding opportunity, if you're replacing a piece of equipment, you can only replace it with a new electric powered piece of equipment. Those are on the market right now, from what I understand, what I've researched. So just like the school buses, regardless of what the technology is that the fuel it is that you're replacing, it can only be an electric powered. So for government owned, so for example, for the Missoula Airport Authority, we could fund up to 70% of the cost of a new belt loader. If it's non-government, if it's a private airport and you need a pushback tractor or something of that nature, we could fund half, which is, I think, about online with what the Federal Aviation Administration has done through some of its previous funding opportunities. So those are the four categories. Now, when you're talking about these different applications, and again, the first example I'm going to give here is school buses, but I want people to understand that this is not all about school buses. These are just the examples I'm giving. I'm going to give one on a garbage truck after this slide. Looking at the Argonne National Lab and the U.S. Department of Energy's statistics for the commonly used fuels for school buses, you have diesel, gasoline, propane, low NOx propane, and battery electric. You can see here what the estimated fuel economy is, or miles per gallon equivalent, when you're talking about something like electric, because you're not using gallons of electricity. So they have a calculation to figure out what the equivalent is. A diesel powered bus gets, fuel economy gets about 8.2 miles per gallon. Gasoline, propane buses get a little bit less, 6.8. A battery electric vehicle is very efficient. It gets an equivalent of 24 mpge. Now, when you look at national ranges of fuel costs and you calculate it with these fuel economies, this again is only the fuel. This isn't talking about maintenance savings or the upfront costs of a more expensive battery electric vehicle. This is just the fuel. When you calculate those fuel economies with the fuel cost, you can see that a diesel bus on fuel alone costs 39 cents a mile to operate. For gasoline, it's a little bit higher, 45 cents a mile, propane, 43 cents a mile. Assuming a little bit of a higher end for electricity costs at 14 cents per kilowatt hour here in Montana, an electric bus will cost you half of 1 cent in order to operate the fuel. That's how much savings you get from not only an increased fuel economy, but also lower fuel costs. Fuel costs, as I'm sure many of you fleet operators know, especially for diesel and gasoline, tend to fluctuate a lot more than electricity costs. When you're talking about the holiday season, 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day, whatever part of the year, Christmas time, Thanksgiving coming up, fuel prices are going to change a lot. Electricity prices stay a lot more level. And so again, using the A-Fleet tool from Argonne National Lab, you can also see what the emission savings are. Again, we're prioritizing NOx pollutants, but also you can look at greenhouse gas emissions. But for NOx pollutants, diesel certainly has the most annual NOx emissions per year. It's just over 37.6 pounds per year, which sounds like a lot, but when you're talking about these very fine, small pollutants that can get into your lungs and cause respiratory problems, that's a significant amount. And you can see that with gasoline and propane, the reductions of NOx is significantly less. With a low NOx propane, it's even lower. With a tailpipe-free battery electric, it's 0. So there are a lot of ways to reduce these emissions in school buses. And again, not to make people think this is all about school buses, this is the same information from the U.S. Department of Energy and Argonne National Labs for garbage trucks. Again, a battery electric garbage truck, which are out there. Mack truck is making them right now as we speak, as are other manufacturers. In fact, the Mack was the one that was on the first slide that you saw at the beginning of this webinar. They are more expensive, but again, the fuel cost is significant. With a garbage truck, their fuel economy is just terrible. I mean, that's just the way they are. It's a huge, huge piece of equipment that's adding more and more weight as it goes through its route. So it's just going to get bad fuel economy, especially when you compare it to the light-duty passenger vehicles we drive to and from work every day. So a diesel gets about 1.7 miles per gallon, according to Argonne National Lab. So about the same for compressed natural gas and liquefied natural gas. But again, when you look at battery electric, 5.6 is not very high, but it's a lot higher than 1.7. And again, when you use the same fuel costs, you're going to see a significant reduction in fuel cost savings. And again, with these being much bigger vehicles than a school bus, you're going to see a lot more NOx pollutants per year, almost 150 pounds per year. You see a significantly lower amount when you talk about CNG or LNG, compressed natural gas or liquefied natural gas, 0 from a tailpipe, free emissions, battery electric garbage truck. So there are significant savings there. Now, how are we going to make these awards? Again, we're prioritizing reducing NOx emissions, but that's just one part of the criteria that we're going to be looking at. That's on pages 6 through 7 of the funding opportunity that you can find on our website. Not in addition to NOx emissions, we're talking about long-term air quality benefits for the greatest number of Montanans. So in some cases, when you're talking about transit buses or municipal parking lots where they keep their fleet of garbage trucks or street sweepers, it can be in near residential neighborhoods in some cases in Montana. So if you're going to be moving to a cleaner burning or a 0 tailpipe emissions vehicle, then you're going to score higher points for that. Also, again, because the settlement is talking about investing in clean alternative fuels and infrastructure, going diesel to diesel on a truck or a bus, for example, will get some points. But if you go from diesel to propane or diesel to electric, you're going to be eligible for more points in the scoring criteria. Also, we're talking about sensitive populations, especially when you're talking about people who are more at risk to be exposed to health issues as well, including diesel emissions. So we're going to be looking at that. And we also want to make sure that you include, these are low points, but you need to include your project timeline, your project budget, and what your maintenance plan is going to be. I won't lie to you that moving from a diesel to an electric platform will be a significant change. It's something that some transit agencies here in Montana have already done, but it's something that can be done. But making sure that you are aware of the changes, how are you going to make sure to take care of it, and things of that nature. We'll want to make sure that everybody's set up for success should these projects be awarded. I'm not going to go through all of this because, again, it's on page 8 of the proposal materials. and instructions, but this is a list of all the things that you need to make sure to include with your proposal application. We do want you to fill out the application form that's included in your in the RFA. We have in previous funding opportunities had applicants submit something that didn't include our application. They said, well, you didn't specifically say your application form. Well, here we are. So make sure to fill that out. Letter of commitment for the matching funds that your entity or organization will be providing, proof of ownership, whatever that is. I know it's different when you're talking about a street sweeper versus a garbage truck versus a belt loader. So some of those things may not have VIN numbers. Whatever you can do to show that there is proof of ownership, a photo of the engine tag or the equivalent, to make sure that we're all on the same page of the model year, that it's diesel, the emissions family, and things of that nature. Again, if you have questions about it, if that thing is shaken free over the course of its use over the years and you don't have it anymore, we can also be flexible on that. Just be in touch with us and ask us questions. The VIN plate, again, if applicable. And then also with the Volkswagen settlement dollars, this is a nationwide settlement. And so, but it went to 50 different states as well as others. In Montana, we chose to go by state procurement laws. And one of those requirements is that you solicit 3 bids for your proposal. So if you're looking at, again, as an example, an electric garbage truck, go out there and solicit 3 bids for how much that would cost. If you're not able to find them, if manufacturers aren't interested in providing you a quote, or they don't respond to you for whatever reason, simply document that. If you only get 1 or 2, and you say, oh, now I'm not eligible to apply anymore, don't think that. Be in touch with us and ask us and explain what happened. And I think that we have received applications in the past saying that a vendor, a manufacturer simply they didn't have the time or the inclination or whatever to submit a bid, and we're willing to submit applications even if that's the case. Again, the first application due date is January 14th. Hopefully that's enough time for entities and local governments and organizations to do some research, ask some questions of manufacturers or DEQ, and then be able to submit a proposal in the middle of January. And hopefully we'll be able to all shake off the cobwebs of the holiday season and be able to get all the final things addressed by the middle of January. So again, if you have problems over the holiday season getting a hold of people, or you have questions at the beginning of January, please be in touch, and we'll try and make sure that we can get a full application submitted from your entity. We're also right now accepting questions regarding the Clean Truck RFA. Before December 3rd, 5 p.m. Mountain, if you have a question, submit it. If there's a substantive question, if you have a question about a new technology that maybe isn't widely out there yet, and would it be eligible under this funding opportunity, we'll post that to our website if it's a substantive question that could change the interpretation for applicants who may be thinking about applying. If it's something like, oh, can I apply for an electric school bus from this manufacturer and not get a bid from that manufacturer? That's not really substantive. So you can ask those questions up until the application deadline. But if you're not sure if it's substantive, I would definitely encourage you to submit those questions to us before December 3rd. And we'll post those to our website. There are some already posted now that we always expect to get. So check out some of those frequently asked questions that are already up on our website, and check in again over the next couple of weeks to see if there's any new ones we end up posting. And again, it'll be on the same website, and just go back, hit refresh, and check in to see if there's any new updates. At this point, I'll open it up to questions. We have a full hour scheduled for this webinar, and it's only 35 past the hour. So I'm hopeful that we can get to as many of your questions as we can. If we end early, we'll end early. I can certainly stay around and ask questions as long as necessary, even if others have to drop off. This slide is just a reminder of the 2 different funding opportunities. This is my contact information. Feel free to call or email me anytime with questions about either of these funding opportunities. And again, if you do have what you think might be a substantive question on the clean truck, please submit that sooner rather than later. So I'm going to ask Ben if we have substantive questions to be asked.
Okay, Neil, you got a few questions here. One from Aaron Aquino regarding a 2009 diesel engine cutoff. The question is, does the 2009 diesel engine cutoff year ever increase for a diesel for another diesel?
Well, so the 2009 cutoff is if you're wanting to replace a 2009 garbage truck, school bus, transit bus, street sweeper, whatever, it can only be as new as 2009. That number is not going to change. So if you want to replace it with, and this again is all listed in the funding opportunity, but you would be, if you're doing a diesel to diesel replacement, for an example, you would be replacing that older 2009 truck, whatever it is, with a brand new diesel version of it. You're doing a like for like replacement, regardless of what fuel you're talking about. So if you're replacing a street sweeper, you're getting about the same size street sweeper, the same type of capacity that's serving the same area. You're not getting something that's new to you. So even if you're looking to buy a new street sweeper or garbage truck that's like 2015 or 2011 or whatever, it's new to you, but it's not new. So you're purchasing a new piece of equipment and scrapping and getting rid of an older piece of equipment or vehicle. I hope that answered your question.
Neil, next question is from Israel Martins. Will a Class 8 diesel terminal tractor's yard dogs be an acceptable project to be funded under this program?
For the follow-up, Israel, and we've traded emails about this. Yes, I believe it would under Category A. The Volkswagen settlement does specifically talk about drayage trucks. So for those of you not familiar with the term, you're pretty much, because we don't have like ocean-going ports here in Montana, a landlocked state. When you're talking about drayage, you're generally talking about a truck that moves trailers around a distribution facility. For example, a big Amazon distribution facility that's moving, a trailer from one dock to another at the distribution hub. There are trucks that are designed to operate just within that. And so, yes, under Category A, a diesel to diesel would qualify. But the type of technology you're talking about in general, Israel, would apply whether it's diesel, alternate fuel, or electric.
Next question is from Jim Steffs. Will there be sample pages provided as a resource for proposal submission?
So I guess that's a good question. We've never done anything like that before. The application form itself is included in the request for applications. And we did try to, as much as possible, say in the application and also the RFA itself, if applicable. So again, in my conversations with airport folks, I don't think their equipment have VIN plates or VIN numbers or titles. And so for an application for something like that, if applicable, if you're applying for a garbage truck, you don't have to estimate how many passengers are being transported because you're not replacing a transit bus, you're doing a garbage truck. So you would just simply leave that portion blank. And we tried to, I think in there also say if applicable in terms of annual ridership. I can certainly answer questions via email or phone calls if you want to contact me if you're not quite sure how to fill out an application or what kind of information it is we're looking for. But to your specific question, I'll have to give that some thought, but thank you.
Next question is from Christopher Cooey. If we're able to find a comparable vehicle on Sourcewell, can we forego the 3-bid requirement as it allows us to do now with other vehicles and equipment?
I will unfortunately have to get back to you on that, Christopher. If you would be willing to email that to me, that specific question, so I make sure I phrase it right when I pass it up the chain of command. I'd appreciate that, and I will get back to you just as quickly as I can.
Next question is from Aaron Aquino. Are 2011 and 1991 yellow buses eligible? I'm interpreting that to be the question.
Hopefully we got that right, Aaron. So 2011, no. It's only 2009 and older. So if you had I guess a 1975 school bus that was still running school bus routes, you could do that. But if you had a relatively new 2011 or 2015 school bus, then no. Under the Volkswagen requirements, it says specifically 2009 or older.
Neil, in regard to that question, can you circle back to the allowable years for replacements under the DERA funding award, the Clean School Bus Program?
So that's a good flag, and I thank you for that. So for under the DERA program, the Clean School Bus Program, where we have $227,000 available, if you're looking to replace your older diesel-powered school bus with a new low NOx certified powered school bus or a battery electric, that old diesel bus can be as old, quote unquote, as 2019. Or it can be as new as 2019, I guess, and as old as 1996. So this is a difference between the two different funding opportunities. The 96 to 2019 is an EPA specific limitation or requirement. The 2009 or older is a Volkswagen settlement specific requirement. So while we can give a lot more money for battery electric school buses under the Clean Truck funding opportunity, you do have to be replacing a 2009 or older. If you wanted to try and do that through the DERA program, the Clean School Bus Program, it could be as new as 2019, but the maximum grant is only $148,500, whereas a maximum grant on a Clean Truck is around probably a little bit less than $300,000. So it's a bit of a difference in terms of the funding that you would be eligible for.
Great. Next question is from Jim Steps. Do you require that the vehicle being replaced be decommissioned?
Yes, and again, that's a requirement of the Volkswagen settlement. And I know that it's new to a lot of entities that may be interested in this funding. There are other federal programs where that's not a requirement, but under the Volkswagen settlement, that is. So if you want to replace your old cement mixer or garbage truck or transit bus or airport equipment, you need to take it completely out of service and render it unusable for future use. Generally, something like that, where in the Clean School Bus Program, those requirements are very clear from the EPA. Generally, it includes cutting the chassis in half and drilling a 3-inch hole in the engine block. Something like that would definitely be acceptable for getting rid of a old garbage truck or whatever the case is. You can also just take it to a scrapyard and have the claw rip it apart. So long as you're demonstrating through video or photos that you would send me to DEQ towards the end of your project as you're going through this process, that the bus and engine cannot be used anymore. There have also been other questions. I heard from the EPA one time that a school district that was getting rid of one of their school buses through their state's Clean School Bus Program wanted to donate it to the local police department and use it as they wanted to blow it up basically and use that as a safety training for police officers. Something like that's not going to work. You're actually causing even more emissions by blowing it up or setting it on fire. So doing something, again, either drilling a hole in the engine block and cutting the chassis in half, if applicable, because I know that airport equipment may not necessarily have that, or having a claw rip it apart. And again, if you just communicate with me either during this application process until January, or if you're successfully awarded funding, we can definitely talk in more detail about that throughout.
Next question is from Michael Dickerson. You stated that the grant limit is $500,000 per project. Can an entity have more than one project? And if so, must we apply independently for each project?
Thank you. That's a good flag. For both of these funding opportunities, it's one project per proposal. So one vehicle or piece of equipment per proposal. But for each of the funding opportunities, an entity like Helena School Districts or the town of Superior, whoever it is, name your business, can submit multiple proposals, but each of them would have to be single projects. So if you want to replace, if you have a couple of garbage trucks that you want to replace, say 4 of them, you would have to submit 4 proposals, and you can do that. A single entity can do that. If one's awarded, though, the other 3 aren't necessarily guaranteed. We'll have to see what kind of proposals are submitted by other applicants come January, but a single entity may submit multiple project proposals.
Great. We're going to go to a raised hand now. Krista Dyer. I believe I have just allowed you to unmute. Go ahead and ask your question, Krista.
Yes, Krista Dyer from the Winifred School District. Do we have to replace a bus, do we have to get the same size capacity per student as our new one? As our old one to our new one? Or can we go from a smaller bus that we have and get a little bit bigger one?
The question, Krista, is depends. Under the Clean School Bus Funding Opportunity, because again, the purpose of that EPA funded program is to reduce emissions. They don't allow for larger buses beyond 10% increase of what you currently have. So we've had that challenge before, trying to make sure that the new bus is no more than 10% heavier than the old bus. But you can do, but if you're going from a class A to a class C, then the answer is no. It has to be a like for like. And same thing under the VW, the Clean Truck Funding Opportunity, Krista, is while there's a little bit more flexibility, I think that a Class A bus would be eligible under our funding opportunity, whereas it wouldn't under the Clean School Bus Funding Opportunity. We are asking for like-to-like proposals because we don't want to increase the amount of emissions on that. So it's spelled out a little bit more clearly in each of the RFAs. I'm happy to answer additional questions offline, Krista.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Next question back to the Q&A from Dan Newman. Are shipping costs eligible for new electric equipment?
I believe the answer is, I believe the answer is yes, Dan, and I'm glad that you tuned in, so thanks for that. If you, if folks look at page 3 and 4 of the funding opportunity, it talks about project eligibility as well as ineligible costs. Yeah, I think it would be. Although my guess is that the sheer cost of the piece of equipment that you'd be looking at, Dan, for the airport would be probably all you need. But we can talk a little bit more about that because I know that airport equipment is going to be a little bit different than a garbage truck or a school bus. But I believe it would be. But page 4, section 2C of the RFA talks about ineligible costs and technology options.
We'll go ahead and post a response to that question just to clear up any confusion. Neil, going to the next question here from Michael Dickerson. Is snow removal equipment eligible for this program?
Yes is the short answer. It would be eligible under category A, under the trucks, the class 4 through 8 trucks. Now, I will admit, I've been searching for the last year or so for for an electric powered bus or truck anyway, that you could reliably use during the winter months and not lose a whole lot of range, and put a snow plow on it. I think they're out there, a little bit harder to find, but if you do want to replace an older diesel powered snow plow with either a new diesel snow plow or some alternate fuels that you know is out there, then yes, that is an eligible cost under category A.
Next question is from Christopher Cooey. Is the $500,000 max for the purchase of the vehicle and purchase installation of infrastructure, I'm assuming charging infrastructure, combined, or is there $500,000 available for each component?
If your organization or entity or local government were to apply for an electric powered truck or bus, you would be including the information on the associated infrastructure with that application and proposal. And so I think with the example of the electric school buses, again, they don't cost $500,000. I won't deny they're not expensive, but they don't cost $500,000. The associated charging infrastructure would cost probably a couple $1,000s, depending on what you decide to get, whether it's a level 2 charger or a fast charger. And I won't get into the differences in those right now. But if the total project cost for your electric school bus were to be $350,000 plus, let's say $3,000 for the charging infrastructure and installation, we would be able to give you up to 85% of that total cost for the infrastructure, the charger, and the bus.
And so just to clarify, we're not providing grants for this funding, either of these funding opportunities for standalone charging infrastructure. Can you confirm that, Neil?
That's right. The charging stations that are eligible are supposed to be only used for the vehicle that you're applying for. For those of you who live here in Helena, there are some charging stations behind the Suds Hut. For those of you in the Missoula area, there's a charging station in the public parking garage downtown by the Holiday Inn. In Billings, there's a couple of them downtown, including the Wells Fargo parking garage and the hospital corridor. Those are publicly available charging stations. Those are not what we're talking about here. This is for your own fleet vehicle, if that's what it is you're applying for. In all likelihood, it'd probably be in your bus barn or your fleet parking lot, or wherever it is you keep the company's vehicles. It would be for that piece of equipment. It's not like a tourist from out of state would come in, roll up into your parking lot and start using your charging station. This would be for your own new electric powered vehicle.
Next question is from Shane Stack. This is a follow-up on this conversation. Would a charging station then require a separate application if an applicant is also applying for a piece of electric equipment? I think we've answered that question. The charging equipment would be included in the application for the vehicle replacement. Anything to add there, Neil?
And again, this is another example of where we try to put if applicable. So if you take a closer look at the application form, we ask about, so on page 12, for example, for the truck and bus application form, I should also note that there are two different application forms. If you want to do categories A, B, or C as your project that you're applying for, use pages 11 through 14 of the RFA, which is titled the truck and bus application form. If you're applying for airport ground support equipment, use pages 15 through 18 of the RFA for those types of pieces of equipment. And if you look on it on page 12, for example, we ask for the total infrastructure cost, if applicable, because here, as we talked about earlier, infrastructure, the only eligible infrastructure is an electric charging station. We can't fund a propane refueling station or gasoline or diesel or compressed natural gas refueling station. So if you're doing an electric application, electric powered vehicle, then again, we put if applicable for the total infrastructure cost is included in your application form.
So we've reached the end of our Q&A and chat questions. I'm going to circle back to a couple that I typed answers to just to make sure folks heard the answers on those. From Paul Pacini, do you expect similar grant opportunities in the near future for the purchase of privately owned green vehicles?
So thanks for the question, Paul. The Volkswagen funding anyway is a finite amount of money. There was the nationwide settlement. States were told how much they were eligible for. In Montana's case, 12.6 million. Unless Volkswagen or some other manufacturer does something naughty again, then no, this Volkswagen money is here until it's spent. And this RFA, this nearly $7.4 million of funding is going to be the bulk of the remaining funds that Montana has from the Volkswagen settlement. For the Clean School Bus program, that's an EPA, the DERA program funded project. And that's something that we basically apply for every year from the EPA. We expect to have more funding like that available in years to come, assuming that, again, Congress, the federal government, continues to have it be a program that's funded through the EPA. So on that side, yes. On the Volkswagen Clean Truck Bus and Airport Equipment program, no, this is what we have right now.
Another question that came through on the Q&A earlier from Anna Plaza: is funding available to repower a school bus? And Anna noted, I can repower a 2020 410,000 plus or minus with a 3-to-1 ratio.
Under the Clean Truck and Bus RFA, repower is not eligible for any application of vehicle or airport equipment. We're only doing vehicle or equipment replacements. In the Clean School Bus, I don't believe that a repower is an eligible project. It should say it in there specifically, but I believe also we're doing simple vehicle replacements and not engine repowers. But I'm happy to circle back with you on that once I can find it in the RFA, but it should be listed in there.
Any other questions out there?
That brings us to the top of the hour. Thank you, everyone, for participating and engaging and asking questions. Again, I would note that the application deadline for the Clean School Bus program is coming up in just over a month. You have a little bit of time on the Clean Truck Bus and Airport Equipment, but because some of you may be looking at vehicles or equipment that you've not worked with before, make sure to take some time to do some research. I'm happy to help point you in different directions. DEQ, of course, can't endorse a particular manufacturer over another, but I've come across a number in my research trying to put together this funding opportunity. So happy to help with you on that. Also, I would also encourage anybody who's seriously thinking about applying for either of these funding opportunities to take a look at the end of each of the requests for applications where we have a sample contract. The Clean Truck Bus and Airport Equipment contract is pretty much based off of the Clean School Bus contract. So there's going to be a lot of similar language. There will be some differences because it's not being funded by the federal government. But take a look at that and make sure that those terms are going to be something that you're acceptable entering into. We've had other funding opportunities in the past where it's taken a long time to enter into a contract because somebody didn't understand what the terms were going to be. Also, again, make sure that you look at the list of documentation that you need to include in a complete proposal. If we're missing something like the project timeline or a letter of commitment, then that application won't be accepted. We won't be opening applications until after the end of the application period. So I'm not going to be looking at them on November 14th, for example, and saying, oh, you forgot something and make sure to get it in before 5 o'clock tomorrow. We won't be looking at them until after the application deadline because these may be competitively scored. So just keep that in mind too. But again, we're happy to answer questions. Get your questions in before December 3rd. And check back, December 10th, sorry. And check back on our website for any updates on the FAQ section. But thank you again for everybody. Please feel free to look back. We're likely going to be posting this recording on our website. So check back there if you or colleagues or coworkers are interested in watching it. But thank you again and have a great rest of the day.